Okay, we're going to do another method of poetry analysis, and this is not really anything in particular. This is just kind of how I usually teach it in class. So I'm going to call it the Wilder method. But if you just kind of take a look through some stuff over here, it gives you kind of a basic understanding. The most important thing is when you are addressing poetry, when you're looking at poetry, when you're trying to figure out what it is, you need to look at it more than once. You need to hear it more than once, because poetry is much, much deeper than anything else you're going to be reading. And because of that, it's tough, it's difficult. And so it takes a little bit of work to try and get a basic understanding of it. That doesn't mean you have to enjoy it. That doesn't mean you're going to. Some things you might enjoy, some things you might hate. But you at least need to be able to go through it and kind of get a sense of what's going on. So usually when I talk about poetry, the first thing that I want anybody to do is just to read through it. Just read through the poem. Just get a sense of it. Don't try and make any big understanding or meaning or anything like that. Just read through the poem. Once you've read through it, you're going to have some maybe confusion. You're going to have some maybe understanding. But you're going to have a bit of a sense of it. And then it's really important to hear it. Poetry is musical language. It is created on purpose. Every word is placed on purpose. There's rhyme, there's rhythm, there's meter, there's things, there's all kinds of sound devices in poetry. And that's what sets it apart. So it's really important to hear a poem. Once you've just read through it and listened to it, then you can start going back and trying to figure out what's actually going on. And you can start looking specifically at language and kind of how it all works together. So I'm going to go ahead and do Ulysses for you. And then you guys are going to do kind of the same sort of thing that I've done with this poem, My Last Duchess. And I know it looks like I've done a ton over here, but you have to remember I've been doing this for a bajillion years. And I also really like this poem. So I had a lot to kind of put some notes on here and some things that I could add to this page. And I wanted you just to see kind of what you can do. This box of tips for annotating a poem, this is just a good list. You don't have to do every single thing in this list. Some things you're not going to be able to do. Sometimes there won't be allusions. There won't be, this is not saying you have to do every single thing here. This is just suggestions. If you're not comfortable with annotating a poem, or if you don't know where to begin, this is just an idea. So the first thing would be for you to read the poem. I've read the poem before, so I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead, and we're going to listen to the poem. We're just going to listen to it. I want you to listen. This guy does a really good job of reading it.
Ulysses.
Oops. It's a older voice. He really captures a lot of what the poem should sound like. So without further ado,
By Alfred Lord Tennyson. It little profits that an idle king, by this still hearth among these barren crags, matched with an aged wife, I mete and dole unequal laws unto a savage race, that hoard and sleep and feed, and know not me. I cannot rest from travel. I will drink life to the lees. All times I have enjoyed greatly, have suffered greatly, both with those that loved me and alone, on shore, and when through scudding drifts the rainy Hyades vexed the dim sea. I am become a name. For always roaming with a hungry heart, much I have seen and known. Cities of men and manners, climates, councils, governments, myself not least, but honored of them all, and drunk delight of battle with my peers, far on the ringing plains of windy Troy. I am a part of all that I have met. Yet all experience is an arch, wherethrough gleams that untravelled world, whose margin fades, forever and forever when I move. How dull it is to pause, to make an end, to rust unburnished, not to shine in use, as though to breathe were life. Life piled on life were all too little, and of one, to me, little remains. But every hour is saved from that eternal silence something more, a bringer of new things. And vile it were for some 3 suns to store and hoard myself in this grey spirit, yearning in desire to follow knowledge like a sinking star beyond the utmost bound of human thought. This is my son, my own Telemachus, to whom I leave the sceptre and the isle, well loved of me, discerning to fulfill this labour by slow prudence, to make mild a rugged people, and through soft degrees subdue them to the useful and the good. Most blameless is he, centred in the sphere of common duties, decent not to fail in offices of tenderness, and pay meet adoration to my household gods when I am gone. He works his work, I mine. There lies the port. The vessel puffs her sail. There gloom the dark, broad seas. My mariners, souls that have toiled and wrought and thought with me, that ever with a frolic welcome took the thunder and the sunshine and opposed free hearts, free foreheads. You and I are old. Old age hath yet his honour and his toil. Death closes all, but something ere the end, some work of noble note may yet be done, not unbecoming men that strove with gods. The lights begin to twinkle from the rocks. The long day wanes. The slow moon climbs. The deep moans round with many voices. Come, my friends. 'Tis not too late to seek a newer world. Push off, and sitting well in order, smite the sounding furrows. For my purpose holds to sail beyond the sunset, and the baths of all the western stars until I die. It may be that the gulfs will wash us down. It may be we shall touch the happy isles and see the great Achilles whom we knew. Though much is taken, much abides. And though we are not now that strength which in old days moved earth and heaven, that which we are, we are. One equal temper of heroic hearts, made weak by time and fate, but strong in will, to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield.
All right. So I just love that poem. Let's just kind of go through it now. So we have dipped our toes in, we've kind of read it, we've just looked at it, we've heard it. And that guy does a really, really great job of reading it. You notice that, you can feel in his voice kind of how the speaker should be feeling. And that helps us understand tone. Tone is something that we always struggle with, but you have to think about it as like the emotion that we're trying to put forth. And when you hear poems read properly, you can really understand tone a lot better. And then the last step is to just go back and dig into the poem. Get in there with a pen, a pencil, an annotating tool, or whatever. Everything in poetry is on purpose. Every word choice, every line length, everything is on purpose. And so if things sound cool, that's supposed to be that way. There's sound devices, there's poetic devices, there's all of these things that the poets have kind of spent so much time revising and going back and fixing and making them perfect. So everything in poetry is on purpose, and that's what makes it so difficult. There's so much more in every poem that anybody will ever be able to understand, and that's okay. You just need to kind of have the tools to get your own sense of what it is. So I'm going to go through here. I'm not going to go through all of my notes. You can see there's lots of them on the side. And I just kind of stuck a comment or a pin in there anytime I thought it was something kind of significant or important. And so that's kind of the first thing I did is as I went through it, I just commented out to the side. I put questions, I put definitions, I did all kinds of things and just tried to kind of put notes on there. You know, if I was annotating with a pen, this is the sort of stuff that I would write out to the side. And so all of these little turquoise lines and dots, these are all things that I've gone through and I've kind of put those points on there. If you notice, there are 4 stanzas in this poem. Remember that a stanza is a paragraph in poetry. And each stanza kind of has its own tone. Anytime in poetry, anytime really in most literature, there's a break, like a line break, that means something is changing, something is shifting. It might be a tone, it might be a speaker, it might be a setting, it might be a content, but something is changing. So this first one, he's just reflecting on everything. He says, you know, he's idle, he's got an aged wife. He meets and doles laws to his people and they just don't know him. They know not me. And then he has this line here. He says, I am become a name. And that's really kind of a powerful thought, but almost a depressing thought. Like Ulysses, Odysseus is this name, it's this title, and it's not him anymore. And then we have this shift where he kind of looks back on everything, but he also thinks about, you know, what's left for him. Um, and so his tone is, it's still kind of reflective and melancholy, but it's also looking forward a little bit. The third stanza, he reflects on all that he leaves behind. And so his tone is still reflective, still kind of melancholy, but it's got a little bit more pride to it. And when the speaker over here was talking, you could hear he was, you know, he talks about his son and his son can do these things and his son can, you know, live up to what these people want. And then he talks about, you know, his son will do the right thing when he is gone, when Ulysses is gone. And then we have this major shift. This is kind of like the big decision, the big realization, the big like, all right, dude, I'm out of here. So this last stanza, he says, here lies the port, the vessel puffs her sail. He's looking at the marina, he's looking at ships, and he says, let's go. These are my mariners who have toiled and wrought and thought and fought, and you have all this, you know, internal rhyme, and that's on purpose. Um, it's, you know, supposed to show this comfort and this familiarity with these people, the mariners who are on his ship, because they've been through things with him. He says, you and I are old. He and his mariners were old, but that's okay. Um, that doesn't mean we're done. You know, there's still some work of noble note. And he says, let's go. Let's get in the ship and let's go. Um, my purpose holds, my intention is to get on this ship and to sail beyond the sunset and to just keep going and find what adventure and find what amazing things he can until he finds death. And, you know, maybe their ship will take them to the underworld and they'll end up all dead again. In the underworld, they'll see the people they've known, they'll go all of that, but that's okay. That's where they're headed. He says that's all right. And then he has this kind of last thought. He says, you know, we are not what we used to be. We are not young. We are not strong. That which we are, we are. We've grown old. We can't do anything about that, no matter how much we wish. However, we can still choose to be fierce and to live strong and to live life and to go to the very, very, very last possible extent. And so that's this last line. He says to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. That's his lasting message in this poem is, yeah, so what, I'm old. I'm you know, decrepit and gray and wrinkly, but I still have desire in me to learn and to seek and to go, and he's going to do it. So that's just some general like annotated stuff, right? And then it asks you to think about some other things, word choice, imagery. There's a lot of imagery. I don't think I marked any of it in here because it kind of jumps out. Point of view. It's important to understand the point of view in a poem. And it's important to understand the background of Ulysses or Odysseus, like who he is, what he's done, and why his life has become what it has become. You know, what did he do in his youth? Why is he here now? What does he long for? It's important to think about point of view. Tone we already looked at. We talked about some shifting. Um, and then down here, these last two, these are, you know, regardless of what annotations or notes you're making in a poem, you should always want to feel comfortable with this last stuff here. The so what, like why? Why is this poet sharing this with us? Who cares? What's the point? And then what's the theme? What's the lesson? What's the message? You know, what's the heart of this? Why are we sharing this? And so you look back at this poem and you think about all that Ulysses has been through, and he's old and he's decrepit and he's got all of this stuff behind him that he has done and that makes him, you know, famous. But this theme here is just because we've reached the end of a thing doesn't mean we're done. Just because, you know, one thing is done, we can still move to the next. And that is a lasting message for all of life, for all people. Doesn't matter if you're a hero, doesn't matter if you're a king, doesn't matter if you're a peasant. The point is in this poem, never give up. Live your life until the fullest and keep going, keep striving. That's this last line that is so great: to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. Don't ever give up. Just keep going. And at some point, you know, it's going to bring you to your last moments, but that means that you're going to live every moment, you know, fiercely and strongly and enjoy it. This is the idea of this is called a carpe diem poem. You guys have probably heard that before. I'll put a little note down here. We'll do it in red. Carpe diem. Oh, that's carpe diem. Means seize the day. Do whatever you have to. Get in there and do it. Oh, that's not how you spell seize. There we go. Seize the day. So that's just kind of a quick walkthrough of how I would go through a poem the first time or any time that you're looking at it, really. And remember that I'm always advising you to listen to it at least 3 times or to read through it at least 3 times. Just that surface reading, then you need to hear it, and then you can start digging into it and trying to glean meaning from it. And I didn't go over everything in this poem. You could talk for hours and hours and hours about this poem and what it means to me and to you and to other people, and you know what the poet meant. And you could talk forever about poetry, and that's not the point. You're never going to be able to tell me everything about it, and I'm never going to ask you for everything about it. I just want to see that you get some sense of it and you can understand what's going on and kind of write down here what is the point, the so what of it. And that is the Wilder method.